Hello, and welcome to another week of Teaching with Shangan. This week we're going to be talking about teaching for dyslexia. All right, so as we get started, we're going to look at our agenda. So we're going to go through the history of dyslexia. So we're going to start with like where it was founded, how we got to where we're there are now, and then we're going to get their basic understandings of what our dyslexia is, how we can use it. Then we're going to go into the effects on the school setting. And then at last, we're going to look for tools for dyslexia to help those of us who do have that dyslexic student. We want to make sure everyone here is getting the same amount of chances as everyone else. So as we get started, I do want to look at this quote here. It says, how we learn has nothing to do with how brilliant we are by Henry Winkler. Some of you all may remember him as the Fonz, but he also participated in a fair amount of dyslexia forward thinking. So let's go ahead and get started in this. So for our history, as we're looking at it, so when we're looking 1883, 1887, Rudolf Berlin started to really work on shifting away from the word blindness into dyslexia. The reason we switched out of this term from word blindness to dyslexia is it changed it from a reflection on the person being dumb or lazy, and then focus more on it becoming a disability. And this is where we first start seeing support structures being built. And then later, 1896, so just a short while later, we have Dr. W. Pingle Morgan. And this was the first time that a student had been studied for dyslexia. So up until this point, dyslexia had been thought of mostly as a lessening of the person. So we were talking about negative connotations of being dumb or can't read. And then we have majority of cases, or pretty much all the cases, being in adults. So we're not seeing it as a childhood thing. So this is mostly being noted from brain trauma or other things that happen later in life. But this is our first case for students. And then we move on a little bit later into the 1930s. Now that we've gotten some case studies on students, um, we start developing the Orton Gillingham approach for in development of learning how the dyslexic brain can work and how to, stray away from more of the sight words and more focus on how the phonetic structure goes. And you look at a new style of dyslexic teaching, which still remains a staple today. So this was, 90 years ago, and now we still have that information, that research still coming in today. And then to finally remove all of that stigma away from dyslexia, we have Dr. Sally Shaywitz and her team. They go in and they do MRI scans of a dyslexic individual. And what they find is that the light up for the recognition of reading, so like seeing a word, recognizing it, pronouncing it, it does not fire as strongly in these individuals with dyslexia. So we're seeing a physical difference in the brain mechanics of the dyslexic individuals with MRIs. Okay, so now we've got all of that research and understanding that we've accumulated over 100 years of studying. So what does that lead us to? So this is where we're going to start as teachers. We can start looking and seeing what sort of effects that we have on our students and what are the things we can do, because like as teachers we are our first line for identifying some of these things. We are trained to identify teaching, learning, and so we're right there and there. So let's look at it. So our symptoms and our signs. So our first thing we want to look at, we're looking at delayed speech, rhyming struggles, a high frequency of roadblocks, slow spelling ability. I mean, you're kind of getting the idea of this. This is all things that are um, combined to show a low performance in the language arts. I know personally, I am a dyslexic teacher, and I know I could not spell very well, and the thing I've always had was my spoken vocabulary being much higher than my written vocabulary. Um, and there are causes. So causes, we are looking at it mostly being a genetic thing. The way I actually wound up getting tested is I was telling my grandfather when I was 26 the struggles having at work, getting some codes right. And he's like, well, dyslexia does run in our family, so I went and got tested. So like a lot of later in life diagnoses are happening. So we do want to try to, look at those symptoms and signs for students and maybe help them there. Um, and there's a difference. So like majority, we're getting at genetics. We do have some later in life, but it's really considered a acquired dyslexia versus developmental dyslexia. And for us as educators, we're mostly going to be dealing with that developmental dyslexia. The acquired dyslexia can still lead to confusion reading, spelling, and word comprehension problems. But that's going to be a little bit outside of our purview as teachers. So, all right. So we got some symptoms. So say we're seeing some students who are having some issues with their vocabulary. They need to speak to us. They're spot on. They're able to discuss everything, clear, strong sentences. But then they write. Or, we're having that delayed speech, depending on, what grade you're teaching. I'm mostly teaching in high school, so I'm looking for that difference in reading skill versus speaking skill, stuff like that. And so we got those identifiers. We've seen some symptoms. So let's look at our diagnosis. So our diagnosis is going to start with interview and data collection. So, like similar to a lot of these disabilities that we're learning about, we are going to want to collect data. We're going to want to interview, and this is going to be for a specialist to do. So as a teacher, we're going to identify, we're going to talk to our counselors, we're going to talk to our admin, and we're going to get specialists in there. And those specialists are going to come in, they're going to do the interviews, they're going to collect that data. They are the ones who are going to make a diagnosis. We are not going to diagnose. We are our first responder. We put a flag on that play. And the specialists come in, they're going to make that determination. Um, so again, symptoms, any sort of word issues. We're having spelling issues, vocabulary issues, a strong propensity for auditory learning. Um, Causes, we're looking genetic. For our students in our K through 12, genetics is what we're looking at. So if a father or a mother has dyslexia, we can be on the high alert for the student to have dyslexia. And then that diagnosis, again, we flag it, specialists come in, they determine if the dyslexia is actually there. All right. So now that we've looked at our research, we know we found one. Let's look at, we've got a student who has dyslexia. Let's look at how that's going to affect them during their school setting. So students are going to have a lot of different effects. The ones we're really going to be looking for, the common ones we see, is our students are going to fall behind due to their poor reading skills. If a student is struggling to read, they're going to have less, they're spending more time on that reading, less time on that understanding, that processing. So they're going to have students going to fall behind just because of those reading skills. Some of the other things we're going to look at is the students will be able to explain the work verbally. They're going to be excellent presenters, but if you assign them that essay again, you're going to see a dip in academic performance because that is not their jam. Um, Again, let's keep going. We got some of the other effects we're going to see. Dyslexic students may seem to shut down early. They become lazy in the afternoon. Man, it's kind of if you were a runner and you were running, and then one day someone put a parachute on your back and you were pulled back because it's every time you do takes more energy. This is what a dyslexic person is going to feel like. So that effect on that school. There's research showing that due to the dyslexic brain taking 5 times as much energy to decode the same amount of words as a standard student, they're going to become tired faster. So it's not laziness. This is just fatigue, mental fatigue coming through. And something else we talked about earlier, that reading skill is going to be a little bit lower. So during verbal reading activities, that student may try to act out. And this is an anxiety reaction. They're reacting to a high stress scenario where they know they're bad at reading and they're about to read in front of school. So, I mean, we can try to identify our dyslexic students, maybe give them an easier passage, let them know what the passage they're going to be reading tomorrow. These are things we can do to help them just lower that level of anxiety. And then the last thing, again, it takes them longer to read. So if you have an essay project or you have a math worksheet that has a lot of instructions on it, keep in mind those time constraints. So they are going to be lagging a little bit and getting started on projects, not out of laziness. It just takes them a little longer to read. All right. So we talked the effects. I kind of hinted at some of the things we can do as educators. So let's go ahead and just dip right on in there. That's what we're looking for today on our weekly teaching podcast. We want to look in, make sure we as educators, what's our takeaway? So let's get into that. This is the meat and the grill of it all. All right, so things we can do as educators. First, we're going to adopt structural literacy. So get to the details into the words. Break down the individual letters, the phonics, the words explicit about phonetic rules. So don't just say I before E except after da da da. Da. Show them hardcore examples of it. They want to physically see that. This is going to help them remember it, associate those words back and together, and then that's really more for our learning to read level. Something alternative to print. Absolutely love this myself. I personally got several e-readers that help me get through things. Especially like textbooks. I use e-readers from Natural Reader for textbooks to get through there. Providing alternative copies to so soft books, audio books. That's going to help that student participate at that same speed because often those dyslexic people they can listen to an audiobook at 2 times speed, but to read is they're going to slow them down to half. Another thing we see this a lot on IEPs. This is the most common uh, uh, help that you receive extra time. Dyslexic students, again, slower readers, slower to process it. That extra time, if they know that they got that extra time coming up, they can relax a little bit, pull that little stress off. Um, so it's just a good all around little bit of help there, that extra time. And then another thing you do, multiple ways of learning. So we just mentioned earlier, like students might like a little more auditory versus visual. If you're keeping that rotation in your classroom, and we talk about this all the time, keep the rotation of visual, auditory, kinetic, moving, lecture. You keep that change up so that you can make sure you hit all of those different learning styles, especially for your dyslexic students. That's going to be highly key. So those auditory, those kinesthetic learning days are going to be just the perfect thing for them. Make sure, if you are having one of those days, give your dyslexic person a little heads up, like this one's for you. All right. So the last one, no stress reading. I can't tell you the amount of cold sweats I had as a student practicing my lines before I had to read because I knew I was going to mess something up. So, to help your anxiety students, maybe let them know ahead of time what they're going to read, or just have volunteers for reading out loud. If you work with your dyslexia, student, if you need to make sure that they are reading and you don't want to do the out loud dyslexia, maybe work one-on-one with them to see what they want to do to show their mastery of that reading material. So those are the five things we can do as an educator. As always, I appreciate your support. I got our top Patreon supporters down there. So thank you for showing up every week. If you have any questions, you want to top subject, throw in the email right there. Let us know. We'll get it together here at Teaching Shanken. As always, we do have our sources if you want to know where our information came from. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week.